basically saying by not releasing that report is that the information left to our imaginations is not nearly as bad as what actually happened there. That's what the deal is with not releasing that report. Because what we're imagining right now must be pretty awful. At least that's what I'm imagining. What happened is not good by any stretch of the imagination. What is left up to us to even figure out is somehow worse. Not as bad, rather, as the actual details of that report. And the longer that they wait to release it, if they ever release it, the longer that they wait, you understand, the worse that this looks if we ever actually come up on those details. You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Before we jump into any of those stories and more, let's talk about the platforms. Where can you reach us and where can we reach you? Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Those are the places to look. If you were to ask me, I think you should go to those places. You can also check those places out on hotnewstalkradio.com. All of our social media links are there. You can check out our classic episodes of this show and all of our local shows on YouTube. We never call them old. You can also check us out on Facebook. We actually stream live on Facebook. Boom, just blew your mind. You can also check us out in the TuneIn Radio app. Again, that's the TuneIn Radio app. Search it in your favorite app store for your mobile device. Search Hot News Talk Radio in the app. Give us a favorite and press play. And you'll have Hot News Talk Radio everywhere you go. So, okay. So one of my favorite movies. Well, first off, one of my favorite movie genres. Let's just take this in the wide scope. One of my favorite movie genres is the mystery genre. I like mysteries a lot. I like crime stories a lot. More recently, I've been just reading up on James Whitey Bulger. I watched Black Mass and wanted to know more about that actual story because I didn't know a ton about it. And yeah, James Whitey Bulger's a terrifying person, and Boston's a crooked place. That's what I learned basically. And you can't trust the FBI. That's the long and short of what I learned. But I like that entire genre because what mysteries tell you is that perspective plays a lot in what it is that you understand to be the case of what you're seeing. And the great mystery movies reveal to you in a lot of ways that what you think is happening is not nearly as bad as what has actually happened. You cannot imagine how bad this actually is, right? So a couple of movies that I rolled up on recently would be a Korean movie called Memories of Murder, and then a movie that's actually very similar in the 2000s that came out called Zodiac by David Fincher, the same director of Gone Girl, if you've seen that movie at all. So in those movies, the directing of the movie really toys with your perspective of the film. For instance, in Zodiac, whenever the Zodiac killer shows up at a given place, whatever it is that he is described as by the witnesses, that's the guy that you see. So when the witnesses describe a guy that's kind of lanky and kind of tall, the Zodiac killer is played by an actor that is 6'1", 215 pounds. When he's described as stocky, when he's described as being short, a guy that height plays the killer. And it's a very interesting way of basically telling you that you're not getting any more information here than what it is that the detectives are getting, right? So your sense of perspective is being toyed with. And it reminds me a lot of the ways that people see Muhammad Ali. Because when we see a guy that transcends race, when we see a guy that transcends religion, I find that very difficult to believe because he is the opposite of that. Muhammad Ali was pointing at race. Muhammad Ali was pointing at religion. But somehow we got our perspective all wrapped up in the story of Muhammad Ali, which is fine when you're dealing with stories for your perspective to be wrapped up in something. I can watch the movie Zodiac, come away with a different idea of who I think the killer is than what you think. Okay? Ambiguous kind of endings to movies tend to do that to people. I can come up with an idea, and I might be right, and you might be right, but the perspective of the viewer is what matters there. But when you're talking about somebody's life, when you're talking about a human being and the totality of what they were to different people, Muhammad Ali was a guy that stood for stuff, okay? Regardless of whatever that stand was, whether that stand was the war, whether that stand was how people of color were treated around the world, whether that stance was our notions of the Nation of Islam. Whatever stance it was that Ali took, he took a hard stance, right? And it's interesting because I believe it was Jim Brown that said that Muhammad Ali, one of the worst things that could have happened to Muhammad Ali was that he was robbed of his ability to speak. And the one thing that you know about people who do not speak is that you kind of assume for them what it is that they want. Okay, and we assumed for Muhammad Ali all kinds of things that very likely Muhammad Ali did not want. Right? We called him gentle when we talked a little bit about on the show about how cruel Muhammad Ali could be. Right? Like how cruel he was to Frazier, calling him a gorilla and the like. We call Muhammad Ali this guy that is above racial lines and is above religious lines, as though those weren't the things that Muhammad Ali wanted you to pay attention to and to do something about. And Muhammad Ali didn't talk about it. He was about it. The man spent 3 years in jail in the prime of his fighting career, which you ask me is a crime. In the prime of his career, in the prime of his ability to fight, in the prime of his ability to make money at his craft, he went to prison because he wasn't going to go fight in Vietnam. Because it was a war that ultimately the consensus was we had no business being in Vietnam. And to be that forward thinking and to be that ahead of the curve requires a level of conviction that very, very few people have. And it's something that I learned from Muhammad Ali through my father. It's something that I learned. I mean, on my wall in my room right now, there are 4 people on my wall. Okay? 5, if you count my Bryce Harper poster, because I like the Nationals. Leave me alone. 4 people. Okay? 1 is Jackie Robinson for obvious reasons. 2 is Bob Dylan. I like the social activism through music of Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan as a lyricist up there with the very, very best, right? And 3 is Pete Rose. Charlie Hustle. The man epitomized everything that I admire about giving everything 100%, giving everything your best shot. And then, 4thly, it's Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, and also just standing in the background there grinning is Malcolm X. So again, the inability to separate race from the man himself. And you cannot warp the perspective of it because this isn't a story. This is a guy's life. This is a guy's legacy. And when you're doing that, the things that you can learn from a person's legacy go beyond what it is that a story can do. Because a story simply illustrates. A story tells you that this idea can exist. And this idea does exist. And here's the form that this idea can take place. But a legacy doesn't just illustrate. A legacy says that this idea is applied. This idea works in a real world context. And when you start getting to the business of treating people's lives and people's legacies like a story whose perspectives you can change, the audience gets to choose what it is. No, we don't. Okay? This isn't Zodiac. We don't get to choose how this goes. Muhammad Ali was a guy who stood for many, many causes, many of them racial. Okay? The man changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. There was no transcending anything. And race plays an interesting part in all of our lives because we're still not done with it. We like to talk about this idea of post-racial America and how we don't have biases anymore. And that's the worst thing that we can do. To ignore race, to try and transcend it, is to ignore the biases that you might have that are underlying, the biases that you might have that are inside of you, the biases that I might have that are inside of me. And I know that I have them about all kinds of people. And it's not just racial, okay? The stuff deals with sexual orientation. The stuff deals with gender. Being aware of the biases, that if you look at a woman and you say something along the lines of, well, I don't see a woman there, well, then you're never going to get to the reason why she's making less money in a workplace. She's doing an equal job. And also, you're blind. On top of the fact that apparently you don't see a woman. Why not? It's the awareness that gets us to the bottom of these problems. Okay? And again, you don't need to sugarcoat a person's life. We do this all the time. When a person dies, we pretend as though the ridicule that we had about them didn't exist. The questions that were surrounding them, we just let them go. And that's so strange to me that Muhammad Ali was great friends with Malcolm X. And then, because Malcolm X went against the leader of the Nation of Islam and got the boot from the Nation of Islam, Muhammad Ali cut him off as a friend and wound up regretting it. Now imagine that. You have a friend who takes a different ideological stance than you and you cut him off. That's something that you're going to regret and you're going to carry with you. And he did. Muhammad Ali was a real guy. And we can't sugarcoat his life. It doesn't take away from the greatness to see the flaws. But we can't do this applied perspective where we look at something from the angle that we want to see it as and just keep it rolling. Muhammad Ali's life proves that you can overcome racial barriers. Muhammad Ali's life proves that, you know what? Sometimes you have to do what the right thing is, no matter what it's going to cost you. Even if it's going to cost you your prime. I mean, that's the stuff that made Muhammad Ali the greatest. An unflinching desire to do what he thought was the right thing. And in there were mistakes. And I don't understand it because I see it all the time. We see it with Prince passed away this year. Saw it with Michael Jackson before. You've got guys who have flaws in their lives. We've got questions circling Michael Jackson before he dies. He dies. We put all the questions away. We're done asking questions. Why? Why does that doesn't take away from the fact that Michael Jackson was great? He was great. He was a great artist. One of the best. If you argued the best, I wouldn't fight you. How does that take away? It doesn't. But we want to put our perspective on it. We want to look at this person as this shining bastion of greatness. This person who was incorruptible. When people die, that's what we do to them. Heck, we don't even wait till people die. When your career is over, that's what we do. People forget. Michael Jordan was hated. My mom and dad told me all the time growing up, we're just tired of Michael Jordan and all that winning. We're just tired of seeing him win all the time. We'd love to see somebody else win. People hated Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan retires. Everybody loves Michael Jordan. People hated Kobe. Kobe retired this year. People didn't even wait till Kobe retired officially to hate Kobe. We had Kobe's farewell tour. And it's going to happen to LeBron. All the people that hate LeBron When LeBron's career is over, all that criticism of LeBron, up in smoke. It's going to go away. All the people that hate on Brady, his career's done. I mean, all of the criticisms of Peyton Manning, we're going to forget that Peyton Manning played poorly in that last Super Bowl. You know why? Because we did it to Elway. Elway's last Super Bowl, his numbers are nearly identical to Peyton's. Nearly identical. We forgot. It's what we do. We love the perspective of the infallible hero. I think that the flawed guy is much more interesting. I like flawed Ali. Because a guy that had wrinkles, and a guy that had depth, and a guy that had flaws, and a guy that could be tough as nails, okay, and could be sharp as arrows, and could be mean as anything you've ever known, that guy still came away with the title of being the greatest. That guy's still the greatest. And I like that version better because I know my flaws. And if you're telling me I can be a great person despite what's wrong with me, I'll take that. Ali was the greatest. Not because there was nothing wrong with him, but despite the things that were wrong with him. And every one of us can do that. And that's the point of a legacy. That's what it's supposed to teach us. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me today, making me just a small slice of your day. You know that I appreciate you. I want to talk just for a small second about the NBA Finals a little bit, because I don't think Cleveland is going to win a game. And this isn't an overreaction type thing. Okay, I looked at this game, and I saw a Cleveland team with no answers. Okay, when Golden State was down 3-1 to the Thunder, I didn't see a team with no answers. I just saw a team getting outplayed. Golden State's not just outplaying Cleveland. Golden State is outplaying Cleveland. They're outthinking Cleveland. They're outworking Cleveland. The matchups don't work in the Cavaliers' favor. Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving cannot defend. There is nowhere to hide them. If you hide them, that team can't score. Tyronn Lue seems to be worse off this year than David Blatt was. The whole point of firing David Blatt was to somehow improve on what you did against Golden State last year. And now we're at the point where they've beaten you 6 straight times, and they are averaging over 105, and you aren't averaging 90. This is a problem, because if you can't crack 100 against the Warriors, you ain't winning no games. Okay? And if you can't stop the Warriors from getting to 110 on a nightly basis, guess what? You still aren't winning games. Cleveland just looks outclassed in every way. I would be shocked if they won a game. I want to see epic LeBron, but honestly, I don't think that helps us here. We still haven't had a good Stephen Clay game yet. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose, college football news, and Baylor stuff. Next.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240. You and I know that real men are prepared for anything. You know what I'm talking about because you're a Take Charge guy. Everyone's talking about Grimm's Tactical, featuring first responder gear, survival gear and equipment, Voodoo Tactical, Leapers. For personal protection, Grimm's Tactical features non-lethal personal protection gear, AR/AK parts, knives, canning and dehydrating equipment. If you hike and camp, Grimm's Tactical has got what you're looking for, bags and packs. And for your side piece, concealed carry holsters for men and women. Plus, Grimm's Tactical carries a wide variety of freeze-dried food. Wise Mountain House, Backpacker's Pantry, Grimm's Tactical, where law enforcement shops, Safari Lane, Blackhawk, 511. First responder gear at Grimm's Tactical. Grimm's Tactical, 8115 East Brainerd Road, in the shopping center next to the Walmart Marketplace. Look for the Mighty Mini U-Haul office. Grimm's Tactical is right next door. Grimm's Tactical, 8115 East Brainerd Road. Finding just the right place to live can be a daunting task. Stop your search. In Chattanooga, the place to live is Cross Creek Villas for under $1,000 and available for immediate move-in. You can enjoy this 2-bedroom split layout, over 1,000 square feet, 9-foot ceilings, an extra-large patio or balcony. And don't forget to ask about their preferred employer program. Cross Creek Villas is a gated community, offering a 24-hour fitness facility, a beautiful pool and hot tub, and Cross Creek Villas is pet-friendly. Stroll the pet park with your best friend and enjoy the free use of their business center and clubhouse. Plus, if you mention you heard this on the radio, your application fee is free. Cross Creek Villas, close to downtown off of Highway 58. Go to crosscreekchattanooga.com. That's crosscreekchattanooga.com or call 894-0446. That's 894-0446. Redefine the way you live at Cross Creek Villas. Go to crosscreekchattanooga.com or call 894-0446. Cross Creek Villas.
Expect clear skies to continue through the nighttime, cooling down nicely overnight with lows into the upper 50s. For Wednesday, a beautiful day. Sunshine, pleasant highs, 81 to 83. Tomorrow night, lows back into the 50s with more sunshine for Thursday, highs back into the mid and upper 80s. Get ready for Riverbend starting this Friday with discounted admission now at Area Kangaroo Express and Circle K locations. Save $15 off the gate price. For more, riverbendfestival.com. And I'm Soar Team 12's Chief Meteorologist, Patrick Core.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. A tractor trailer full of fiberglass caught on fire on I-24 this morning, blocking traffic for over an hour on I-24 eastbound. There were no injuries, and the driver detached his truck from the trailer when he saw smoke. The district attorney says he will not be pressing charges against Trooper Clyde Reeves, who was involved in a fatal crash which killed Jim Darner, who's 66, after an investigation determined that Clyde Reeves was driving while inattentive in the moments leading up to the crash. The DA said the facts of the case would support a case of civil negligence, but not a viable criminal prosecution. A body that was found near the Wilcox Tunnel has been identified as belonging to 33-year-old Justin Trimble, who was reported missing more than a week ago. Officers found his body under a crashed motorcycle. The police believe that the driver negotiated the turn incorrectly, went over the curb and into the woods and died. A Lafayette man has been asked by the Housing Authority to remove a Civil War display from his front yard, citing complaints they'd received and advice from their legal department. The owner of the property says he has no intention to remove the monument. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot News Talk Radio.
Hot News Talk 1240.
So this whole situation with Baylor and the Pepper Hamilton report, it's pretty horrid. It is pretty horrid. They're basically, what they're doing is obscuring information. Now, again, we've talked about this on this show. Let's just backtrack a little bit before. Baylor is a private institution. This report that they have run on their own internal affairs that they have so poorly mishandled is entirely up to them whether or not they want to release it. Okay? The Clery Act, none of that stuff actually applies to Baylor in this particular instance in terms of releasing information. The Freedom of Information Act, my bad, FOIA, does not apply to Baylor because even though they are very much subsidized by the government, and even though they very openly and willingly take government money to help run their institution, they are still considered a private institution, and they do not have to divulge any of that information. And today, yesterday, they said that they will not be doing so, and they continue to not do so. Now, the thing that is most interesting here is the reason why they're not doing so, which is that they're saying they're not doing so to protect the victims. They're not doing so because the victims need the anonymity. Now, if the victims want to come forth and talk about it, talk about what happened, talk about what didn't happen, they are free to do so. They are allowed to do that. But Baylor is not going to be releasing any information. And on first glance, that sounds reasonable. That sounds like it makes some sense. But the more that you think about it, the less sense that actually makes. The more that you think about it, the less sense it actually makes. Because what Baylor is saying is, in order to protect the victims, we are not going to release any of this information. Well, any details that you think would harm the victims, you can redact. You can cover up names. You can switch out names for names that don't exist. Just go John Doe and Jane Doe all the way down. You can change any detail that you want that protects the victims with regards to their names, even particular locations. What you're doing is you're hiding the information and you're using the victims as a reason to hide the information. And if that is not the dirtiest, most low-down thing I have ever heard in my entire life, I don't know what is. You're using the victims so that you don't have to release any particular information. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous, right? Like, you don't, it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back with Baylor. Just when you think that they're okay, we've grown a conscience. We fired Art Briles. Not that we necessarily wanted to, but we did it. We didn't hang on to him in the name of football. We hired Jim Grove, which is a hire that honestly makes no sense outside of the strength of Jim Grove's morality, which is something that you need here just entirely. Like, you cannot mess around and have the next football coach also be a guy that will turn the other way in the name of wins. You need a guy that's straight up morals. Jim Grove's the guy. And it looks like, okay, Baylor's moving in a positive direction here. And then they come out and do this and completely use the victims of this case as a shield so that they don't have to release the details of this case, which is something that they should do. And again, there's no reason not to do it because you can redact all of this information. There's no reason why you can't. So now you just got Baylor out here being ridiculous. And I don't know how it is that we can allow that to happen, but I guess it's not entirely up to us. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me today, making me just a small part of your day. You know that I appreciate you. I do have to also hit up another story that we talked about yesterday. And we're going to get to Kimbo Slice in a little bit. Kimbo Slice, the MMA fighter that passed away yesterday at the age of 42. Interesting story, Kimbo Slice. But before we get to Kimbo Slice, Ariel Helwani, whose name I hope I am still not mispronouncing. The UFC reinstated him yesterday. Reported yesterday that Ariel Helwani basically had his UFC credentials revoked. He was kicked out of a UFC event and told that he would not ever be getting credentials to future UFC events for reporting a story about Brock Lesnar being in UFC 200, I believe. 200 or 202. I didn't put it in my notes. One of the UFC starting with 2 coming around the corner here. So Brock Lesnar coming back from retirement. Ariel Helwani catches wind of the story, and he reports the story, and the UFC, livid that this information got out before they were ready for it. And honestly, Ariel Helwani banned from the UFC for doing his job, which is reporting. He's a reporter. He reports. He works for MMAfighting.com, not the UFC. And he works hard. He says he works hard to get his own stories. And he got that story. The UFC wants their reporters, the reporters affiliated with them, to call them first for a comment. But I'm going to tell you something. I finished J school. I finished journalism school. And there is nothing about that. If Adam Schefter has a story about the Atlanta Falcons or the Tennessee Titans, he can call them for comment. He doesn't have to. There's nothing that says you have to do that. The UFC wants to be able to have final editorial say on your stories? Because, I mean, what's the UFC stance here? If he had called us for comment, we were going to let him run the story anyway? No, you weren't. You wanted that story to be an exclusive reported during live during your UFC event. That's where you wanted that story to happen. If he had called you for comment first, you wouldn't have let him break the story, which, by the way, is what reporters are supposed to do. This is how they get paid. You get scoops, you report them. And then people who find it interesting click on it on the internet, or they buy the paper or the magazine or whatever. Click the link. That's how you get paid. So there's no incentive for him to sit on the story. If the UFC is like, yeah, no, don't report that, and he reports it anyway, what, you think you would be less upset because he called for comment? No, I don't think so. I think they would be more upset. I had a teacher one time. We were it was our French class, actually, over at Chat State, and in the class, okay, we had a classroom situation where we had a few empty classrooms in that hall, and the class was pretty small. There's only 4 of us, and 5 including the teacher, and the class is pretty small. And so we would move to the classroom with the better projector, with more outlets, with more space, bigger classroom. Like, we'd move to that classroom. And, you know, we were asking the teacher, like, hey, do you think that you think we should ask somebody first? And she was like, why? Well, I could ask, but what I'm going to do is better to do it and get corrected than to ask and get denied. So we did it, and we didn't have to change out of that classroom for that entire semester. It was nice. We only had one other time where we couldn't go in there. Another class was taking a test in there. Otherwise, we pretty much went in there unimpeded. Completely. Right? The point of this is, you're a reporter. You've got a story. You don't work for the UFC. If you report this story to the UFC, if you call them for comment and they tell you, no, we don't want you to run with this, do you think they're going to be just cool if you ran with it anyway? No, because you gave them an opportunity to deny you. You gave them an opportunity to deny you. Why would he ever do that? That is literally not in his best interest. Yesterday, we talked about what was in the UFC's best interest, which is, yeah, I can understand why they're mad that he ran with this story. He took their own exclusive away from them. But what's good for Ariel Helwani in no way is reporting to the UFC that you have a story that's their own exclusive. Especially if, no matter what they say, you want to run the story anyway. It's only going to make them more mad. Like, if I tell you I'm going to hit you before I hit you, does that make that better? I don't think so. I think you might have a few problems with that. I think you might have some problems with me. That doesn't make it better. The UFC acting like they're just this gigantic, reasonable organization. Like, no. When you start making the amount of money that the UFC starts making, you stop being reasonable. Look at the NFL, look at Major League Baseball, look at the NBA. Like, there's just a level of reason that you cannot have because you are raking in millions. And if you'd like to continue raking in millions, you continue to not be reasonable and doing things that are in the interest of the dollars. There's no reason there. Like, the more money you have, the less inclined you are to give it away. I mean, goodness, why do you think Republicans hate social programs so much? The more money that you start making, the less likely you are to be giving that stuff away to other people. Ironically, you might do it in terms of charity, but even then, you start looking extra close at who deserves it and who doesn't deserve it. And none of that's wrong, but you're just not inclined to be giving that money away. Why would I expect the UFC to do the same thing? Why wouldn't I, rather, expect the UFC to do the same thing? They're making a ton of money, and they're not about to be giving that money away because Ariel Helwani wants to have a scoop. Because Ariel Helwani got to the story before they could let it out. Yet they're not about to be happy about that, as giant organizations aren't. And then the more money you make, it starts to turn crooked. But I mean, that's Wall Street, right? Like, you just start making an obscene amount of money, and then like you start going from unreasonable to just ridiculous. And that's why the NFL is where it is on head trauma and these kinds of cases. But otherwise, no, man. What do you think this is? You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Make sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Those are the places that you can check us out on social media, comment with us, reply with us. My personal Twitter is @SportsCloud. Every now and then, we can engage in fantastic discussion. I will probably be tweeting throughout the NBA Finals. I mean, I haven't had much to tweet during these games. Like, I didn't even tweet during the last game because I was very engaged in the game in the first, like, quarter and a half. And then once the game started to get out of hand, I was like, what am I going to tweet right now? This is a bad finals? Yeah, me and everyone else on earth thinks so. And it's a bad finals because the Eastern Conference is a joke and offered up a Cavaliers team that had no challenges all the way here. None whatsoever. Like, not one team that was really designed to push the Cavaliers. We got 2 good games out of the Raptors. We didn't get any out of Atlanta. We didn't get any out of Detroit. It's just not been a great run for the Eastern Conference. And the Cavaliers looked like for a while a team that could challenge the Warriors. They look like they shoot threes at a ridiculous rate. But that three-point shooting wasn't something that you could really rely on. And then they already weren't that great of a defensive team, playing teams that weren't even that great at offense. Like, you're the 8th best team defensively in terms of points allowed per game in the playoffs. And you played the Raptors, who for at least 4 out of the 6 games that you played demonstrated for an absolute fact that they cannot shoot. They were just gifting you a good defensive game or 4. And you're only the 8th best defensive team. Yeah, you weren't going to beat the Warriors. You never were going to beat the Warriors if you were Cleveland. I picked them in 5 because I thought they could at least get 1 game in Cleveland. I don't even think that happens. Like, unless all of the Warriors come down with Zika virus or something like that on the way to the stadium. I just don't see it. We haven't even had a good Clay and Steph game yet. I mean, everyone's saying it, but it's true. Steph got in trouble with all these ridiculous, silly fouls that he was doing because he thought he was somehow Defensive Player of the Year. Like, no, Steph, you're not big enough to be stopping LeBron with your single arm. Stop fouling him and everyone else charging to the basket. Just do what Kyrie's doing and just Matador out of the way and then come on the other end and shoot a 3. Why not? I mean, I just don't follow what's happening there with the fouls, but that stopped us from having a great Steph and Clay game because they were shooting well. They just didn't get to shoot a lot because they didn't play a lot. And if you're Cleveland, like, we're playing this team and the best players on this team haven't even played well yet. Like, what are we doing? You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Kimbo Slice, who has a story that has a story arc that follows basically the Pursuit of Happiness, the movie. Like, it's Kimbo Slice's story was like straight out of a Hollywood movie. I mean, and they should probably make a movie about Kimbo Slice. Get a good director and make a good movie about Kimbo Slice. Because Kimbo Slice is live. And if you don't know, Kimbo Slice is an MMA fighter who had a few fights in the UFC, had some fights in Bellator. Not really heralded as like a great fighter, but a guy who made a living off of violence, basically. He was a football player in high school and probably would have played in college somewhere. Don't know how good he would have been. I'm not personally capable of telling you that. But hurricane in Florida derailed his plans, as hurricanes are ought to do sometimes. And he found himself, instead of going to college to play college ball, really homeless and living on the streets, too proud to go back and live with his mom. He was living on the streets as a homeless guy. And one thing led to another. Kimbo Slice was street fighting for money. And that's where he started to get famous. He was street fighting for money. And somebody uploaded one of the fight videos to a porn site, of all places. And the videos took off. You know, Kimbo Slice went from fighting on the street to being a bodyguard. Again, a porn bodyguard, for whatever reason. That industry there just has its ties to shadiness. Let's say that. We don't have to go too into detail into what that is. That particular industry is prone to shadiness. And I think that that's pretty self-explanatory. From there, Kimbo Slice basically got his foot in the door at the UFC, fought a couple of guys, and he won. Like, surprisingly, this guy that doesn't have all of the technical ability and the technique somehow found his way into the UFC. A lot of fighters who train very hard at this and try very hard to be great at their craft found it a joke that Kimbo Slice was on TV fighting with them. But Kimbo Slice approached all of those things with the tenacity of a man who was once homeless, which is to say, he wasn't trying to go back. That's what hunger will do to you. He wasn't trying to go back. Then, you know, Kimbo Slice didn't have a very long UFC career, but he made a living as a fighter after starting out homeless. And that in and of itself speaks to what a little bit of luck and hard work in America can do for you. Okay, but you need people to give you a chance. And he got a chance from a friend who worked in the porn industry that gave him that chance to be a bodyguard. And now he was making legitimate money doing a legitimate thing instead of street fights. Right? That's where we come down on that. And the ability, the drive of hard work that you see in a guy like Kimbo Slice. Okay, I mean, I'm going to tie everything back to Ali. Just understand that that's how this is going to go because I admire the guy so much. But Muhammad Ali is a guy that had his jaw broken in some fights and finished the fights. Back when fights went 15 rounds, not 12. 15. Had his jaw broken in the first round against Foreman, I believe, and went 15 rounds with a broken jaw. 15 rounds with a broken jaw. We've got to think about that as being incredible. That's where grit will get you in America. But people have to give you a chance, man. And that's honestly, that is my huge worry about a guy like Donald Trump. Is that Donald Trump is about being afraid of things that are other, being afraid of things that are not American, being afraid of immigrants. Now, I understand if what worries you are illegal immigrants. I'm not talking about those, though. But the America that I know isn't afraid of outsiders, isn't afraid of people coming in from outside of this country, because those are the people that helped to build this country. And I don't stand in front of you today on this microphone without my father coming in to that country this way, this country, that they weren't too afraid to give him a chance. And I worry that we are so afraid of what could go wrong and what might hurt us that we're too afraid to be Americans. I have I have a strong desire to see that go another way. And in seeing guys get an opportunity, a guy like Kimbo Slice get an opportunity, and while we remember a guy like Muhammad Ali, who didn't try and transcend race because that's what he wanted us to look at, that's what he wanted us to see. Maybe we need to start looking more at it just a little bit more closely, because when we have a guy like Donald Trump who's pointing at a guy and going, there's my African American, which I don't even, you could go into that because I don't even know what on earth that is supposed to mean. What do you mean you're African American, man? Well, you own him? Because he doesn't, does he represent you? I mean, it's coming off as very much as there's my one black friend level of stuff that I'm not going to say offended, but I do feel strongly in some direction about. And I'm not saying go out and vote Hillary. I'm just saying I don't like Trump. I mean, I might just follow Russell on this one and vote McAfee, because I got nothing else for you on that one. Like, every time I hear Donald Trump open up his mouth, more things come out that I'm like, that's not America. To make America great again, you first have to do things like America. And this fear-mongering, this fear, this being scared of everybody, that's the least American thing that I know. We don't quit from stuff. We're honoring a man in Muhammad Ali that didn't just quit from stuff. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch. Free Talk Live next.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark